Welcome back.
Welcome to you all. And it's a little strange for you probably sitting at home, and it's a little strange for me teaching. Miffy is the only person here, but this is a safe way for the classes to happen. So I usually live up at Chenrezig Institute, and I've been coming to this centre since 1992 and studying and being a volunteer and being on committee and various odd things, and so I'll be down here now for a couple of months or a bit more to just seeing how things going and helping with how things go with the classes. Now they're online and things like that. So the class tonight and the next 4 Tuesday nights is called Buddhism in a Nutshell. So this is an overview, if you like, of the Buddhist teachings. So the Buddha taught for 45 years, so it is indeed a very small snippet, a brief overview. And so the Buddha taught that he was not always a Buddha. He was an ordinary human being like all of us. And so this is very important to remember. And he had questions just like we do, who am I, where did I come from, why am I here, why do we suffer, how can I be happy in the long run, all these different things. And so there's a lot of things in similarity with our own. So the Buddha was born in this lifetime that we know him as the Buddha, the historical Buddha, 2,600 years or so ago. In northern India it was at the time, and now it's actually in Nepal, a place called Lumbini. And so in his lifetime he searched for these answers, and his teachings are the answers that he found. So his life is often talked about within 12 deeds, the 12 deeds of the Buddha. And we'll briefly go through these. But the main points to remember is this is about these points, is that this is an illustration, if you like, of different things that we can see that we need to do in our life. We can do these things, a certain amount of similarity to Buddha's life, to achieve answers for ourselves. And when we look at these 12 deeds, we can reflect on our own lives in terms of how we're getting on with the things we want to achieve in our life. So there's just, as all spiritual practitioners believe that they're found as perfect, Buddhists believe that Buddha came to embody all the qualities, all the positive qualities, and become totally free of faults. He also taught that all beings can do this, that we can all progress along the spiritual path over different lifetimes and achieve this perfect body, perfect speech, perfect mind as a result of our actions. And ultimately all achieve full enlightenment. So Buddha was born into, as a prince, Prince Siddhartha, and so great affluence, easily obtaining the things he needed. His father was a king. Now, king at that time didn't mean the king of all of India, but, a very wealthy person in that time. And he had all the things that he needed for education, to sustain life, all these things. So we'll go through these 12 deeds of the Buddha, and as I say, we can reflect on these in terms of our own life. So the first thing was, the first deed was descending from Chi to heaven. So Buddhists believe we've had past and future lifetimes, and Buddha had progressed a lot on the spiritual path, and he was in one of the Pure Lands, which is a very fortunate rebirth. And so before he left, he gave his crown to Maitreya Buddha, who'll be the next founder Buddha. When Shakyamuni Buddha's teachings have all fallen away, then we'll have the next Buddha that comes along will be Maitreya Buddha. So then he descended, and we still remember there's one of the 4 holy days in Buddhism is Buddha's descent from Tushita heaven. So he came down in the form of a white elephant with 6 tusks. So from this we can think about, you know, what have we done in our previous lives. So Buddhism would say we've done a lot of really positive things to achieve the life that we have, living in Australia with easy access to education and healthcare and these sorts of things. And if you're very poor, some support from the government and things like this, opportunities for education and training. And we can also think about, you know, how will different things arise for us during lifetime, and with this body and that we have, what use are we going to make of this body, of this lifetime? And then when we have to leave this body, where will we take rebirth? Where will our next rebirth be? For most of us, we have no idea. I certainly have no idea. But these are the sorts of things that we can reflect on in thinking about this. And then Buddha entered, the second deed is entering into his mother's womb. So this elephant, this dream elephant, came to Queen Mahadevi when she was sleeping and entered into the right side of her body. And so, you know, where will our future rebirth be? What family will we be reborn into, and what characteristics will we take with us from this life and take with us into our future lifetimes? And it says here, if we don't know the answer, we're not prepared yet for our next rebirth. So the things we become familiar with in this lifetime are the things that we take with us. We take our karmic seeds, which is the result of our actions, and whatever we become familiar with. So if we become, you know, if we have strong patience and compassion and these sorts of things, loving kindness, a wish to benefit others, if these are strong in our mind, these are things that we'll easily start doing again in our future lifetimes, and then this way we'll progress along the spiritual path. If we allow ourselves to be familiar with the opposite of those, and most of us are to some extent, there are times when we just feel really impatient and don't really care about others. We're concerned about our own welfare, this sort of thing. Fall to fighting in the supermarkets over toilet paper. You know, there are times when we're just, and that's, you know, people full of fear, full of concern, doubt about the future. So we sometimes have these states of mind as well. And so then the third deed is the birth at Lumbini. And it said that when Buddha was born, he was about the size of a 2-year-old child, and he was able to take 7 steps in each of the 4 directions. And he said, "That's how I have come for the well-being of the world." So, you know, this is for us to reflect on what is it that we want to achieve in this life. What have we done in this life, and what is it we still would like to do with the life we've got, and our future lives. Because the actions we do in this life and actions we've done in past lives, they become the forces to propel us into our future. And so if we're wanting a positive future rebirth, then we need to be developing those things within us that will lead to that. So in the 4th deed of the Buddha, he became skilled in arts and playing sports. So as a growing child, his family had sort of protected him from seeing anything that was going to make him sad or upset. At that time, when a baby was born, the astrologers were asked to come and take a reading about what would be the future of this child. So the astrologer said, this baby will either grow up to be a great king like his father, or he'll be a great spiritual teacher. So his father didn't want him to be a spiritual teacher. They lived in the forest and, you know, the food was not very plentiful, the supply uncertain, there was great risk of tigers and snakes and all sorts of dangers. And so, because his father was a king, he wanted his son to become a king. So he stayed within the palace walls, and healthy young people, you know, boys and girls his age came in and they were educated together and they played sports together, and he became quite skillful at these different things. And this can help us reflect on, you know, what did we do in the time of our life when we were young? I, for one, and many others have done things that, looking back, we probably wish we could have done in other ways or not done at all. But hopefully with maturity, we sort of see that. We see, well, many of our, you know, the people we were young with were doing these things that were probably quite risky and would have horrified our parents. But, you know, now we're less likely to do things that are so risky and dangerous. And if we've done something that we really feel was quite non-virtuous, there are ways in the Buddhist teachings that can help us purify those things. And so we'll talk about those later on in the course. And then the fifth deed was taking charge of a harem. He got married. He had a wife called Prince Yashodhara, and they had a child, and they had friends and all sorts of things, a lovely life. And so we can reflect on our families and, you know, how do we fit into them? Are we doing things that are supportive and nourishing and caring for our family? In our work, do we feel satisfied by the work we do or we used to do? Have we changed jobs sometimes to find something more beneficial for us and for others? And, you know, there are usually some imperfections or other in our lives. The important thing is how we deal with those. And recognising that other people also have, you know, frustrations in their lifetimes. So the sixth deed that was going to the four gates of the city and becoming discouraged with his current life and then leaving that life. So Buddha, he stayed inside the walls of the palace for a long time, and then he asked his father about going out. And his father, he was 29 at the time, and his father said, well, if you want to, and go out with the driver. And so in driving out into the surrounding town, he saw an old man, a sick man, the body of a dead person, and then someone who had become a monk. And so each time he asked his driver, what's wrong with this person, you know, this person who's old or sick or dead, you know. And his driver, who wasn't from quite such a high up sort of position in society, said, oh yes, this happens to all of us. We all get old, we all get sick, we all die. And so this was a new thought for Buddha, because he'd been protected from all of these sufferings. But seeing this suffering and knowing that this would eventually happen to his family and to him, he became disillusioned with the life he'd been leading and decided he'd go and search for spiritual truth. And so he left the kingdom, snuck off at night, cut off his hair because he had very long hair, and so that's why those of us who are ordained, we always have short hair now, or most of us do. And so he took robes and he sought instruction from some teachers. And so from this deed, this sixth deed, we can think about what is it, you know, we want to develop in our life in a spiritual way. What is it that we particularly want to achieve in our spiritual life? And not that we have to leave our family behind, but we might have to question some of our strong beliefs about, you know, well, others get sick, but that's only people who are very old, because it isn't only very old people who get sick or die, and you know, all the pride we have in our strength as young people and all that sort of thing. We have to let go of that sooner or later, because either we'll get old or we'll die before we get old. So, you know, it can be really difficult to, as we age, all the things we can no longer do. But the point is that during this lifetime, however long we have, short time or a long time, is making good use, making it meaningful, making it something that we don't have regrets when this life ends. And so this doesn't mean that we all give up our ordinary life, but that we actually put more time into our spiritual life as well, that we don't just think of this current life, and that this will never end, and what are the really important things we want to achieve. So then the seventh deed of the Buddha was practicing austerities for 6 years. So Buddha went with these teachers and lived with them and studied really well, and they were very happy with his progress in learning what they taught. But he didn't find the answers to the questions he wanted. He didn't feel that that was the complete answer. And so he went into retreat, and he's in retreat with 5 others for 6 years. And then he realised that he was not going to attain the highest wisdom through this retreat. In this retreat, they had very little food, and there are images of the Buddha very thin with his ribs. You can see his ribs and all that sort of thing. And this is the fasting Buddha images, and the message is that without effort we don't achieve big things on a spiritual, you know, in a spiritual path. We have to put effort into it. We don't suddenly achieve great wisdom or whatever. So, so what happened in time was that Buddha realised that this retreat, he was getting weak in his body, weak in his mind, and he wasn't getting any closer to finding the answers that he was seeking. So he decided to leave the retreat, and the other 5 people thought, oh, now he's given up on the spiritual path. But in fact, that wasn't the case. He went and had some food, and then in the 8th deed, he went to the Bodhi tree, which is a tree in Bodh Gaya in the middle of India. It's the 2nd tree now. The original tree died. So these are fig trees, and they live a very long time. There are some in Brisbane in front of the State Library, and one up in Countess Street near Roma Street Station, probably some others, and one in a pot in the garden here at Lumritumba Centre. We have to keep it in a pot because they grow wildly and their roots grow wildly, and they'll be into the plumbing as fast as you can think about it. So we have to keep them constrained unless there's, you know, plenty of room for them to just spread however far they spread. And so he sat under this tree and made this determination he was going to sit there and not move until he found the answers, that in meditation found the answers that he wanted. So the original tree died, but they got a seed from one somewhere in Sri Lanka that had grown from a seed of the original tree. So it's a grandchild, if you like, of the original tree. So he sat in this meditation and really tried to focus his mind to allow that wisdom to arise. And so this was, to develop this level of meditation, it takes great patience and practice, and so that 6-year retreat was not wasted at all. And so the 9th deed is called overcoming the hosts of demons, or maras. So people sometimes see these as external things, but they're also internal things, our own internal anger and desire and all these emotions that come up and disturb our mind. And so it said that Mara sent all these angry and sensual apparitions to distract the Buddha from his quest. And so he sat in concentration and refused to be distracted by these, and he touched his right hand onto the earth, calling on the earth goddess as his witness, and she said, "O greatest of beings, you'll achieve the highest accomplishment." And then Mara and all the different apparitions disappeared. And so from this, we need to see that our Dharma practice is to overcome all the internal afflictions, maras, interferers, whatever it might be, all the things that distract us from our Dharma practice. And in Buddhism, we try and develop the antidotes of those to overcome them. So if our patience becomes stronger than our impatience, then when we see our impatience arise, we will have more patience and we'll be able to overcome it and not be distracted by that impatience, and our mind will remain clear. So sometimes people, having developed a strong sense of having progressed further on the spiritual path, can also remember that all of these are empty of true existence, that they are impermanent, they'll pass, they don't inherently exist. Desire and hate, these things, they arise and then they just disappear and change. So in meditation, we try to develop more and more that mind that's free of those and all the other afflictive states of mind. So the 10th deed was becoming fully enlightened on the 15th day of the 4th month. So Buddha sat there and became enlightened, and then his mind was completely clear and he could see all the past and future lives, all the past lives he's had, and all the things that led up to him achieving this state. And so we can reflect that all the past things we've done have led us to this state. And, you know, what is it we want to do? What is it we want to achieve in the future? And what is it that we need to do on our spiritual path to achieve those things? So it said that Buddha realised that this was a great state of mind, a great step that he'd achieved, this completion of the spiritual path. But it was quite difficult. So Buddha, he achieved Buddhahood or enlightenment. These words are used. And so Buddha means enlightened or awakened one in Sanskrit. And Shakyamuni Buddha, Shakya is his family name, and Muni, M-U-N-I, this is called the able one or sage. So the wise one of this family. And so when Buddha achieved this, he thought, oh wow, this is great, but too hard to teach, not going to teach. No one's ever going to understand. This is too difficult. wonderful, but too difficult. However, he was asked to teach. He was asked by the gods. He sat for 7 weeks just contemplating what had happened and what he'd achieved. And then he was asked to teach. And so he thought, well, I have achieved this, and so it would be beneficial. It would be helpful. And the people that he most likely to understand would be those 5 other disciples that he'd been in retreat with. So he knew where they would have gone on pilgrimage at this time of the year to Varanasi, and it's this 11th deed is turning the wheel of Dharma on the 4th day of the 6th month. So the wheel of Dharma is often portrayed as, I'm not good at showing this now, as being a wheel. Miffy's going to get what we call the Dhamma chakra or the Dharma wheel to show you. And this is often on the front of temples. It's this statue that she's, this thing that she's going to show you. So can you see that?
Pretty sure they can.
I hope so. So this particular...
I'm going to go even in closer so they can have a look.
Ornament, if you like, this is the wheel, the Dharma wheel. And so this is offered in long life pujas. It's seen as one of the holy objects, the Dharma wheel. Sometimes painted, if you ever go up to Chenrezig, it's painted on the temple there. And it's often shown, painted on buildings and things, with a deer either side. And that's because this, when he first turned this wheel of Dharma, it was in a place called Deer Park near Varanasi. And that's where these 5 people had been, these 5 ascetics who'd been in retreat with him, and they became his first disciples. And what he taught there was the 4 Noble Truths. And so there's a question?
You mentioned he was asked by the gods. Who were the gods who asked him to teach?
So Brahma and Indra were the gods who asked him to teach. So these are the Hindu gods, 2 of the Hindu gods. So Buddha was born into a Hindu family, just as Jesus was born into a Jewish family, but he didn't find the teaching sufficient. He wanted to find out more, and so that's how he searched further and found more, and then was asked to teach, because they could see that this would be beneficial for, if he taught, this would bring great benefit. And they were right, because, you know, still today people are benefiting from these teachings, and so we can be very thankful that he did teach, even though he thought it would be too hard. And certainly many of us do not perfectly understand everything he taught, but we can make an effort. By making an effort and recognising there is a spiritual path, there is a way for us to progress on our spiritual path through different lifetimes, and eventually we get that lifetime where we achieve enlightenment. So there are a couple of little verses that I'll read that just put all things together in the Buddha's teachings, just in 2 little verses. Without committing the least harmful act, practice virtue perfectly, completely mastering your mind, that is the teaching of the Buddha. All things are transitory, all passion is suffering, all phenomena are devoid of reality, only nirvana is beyond suffering. So in Buddha's life, we can see that he had all the extreme wealth that was available at that time. He had then in the retreat extreme austerities, but he came to see that either of these were not getting him what he wanted, not reducing overall suffering, not coming to an end of the spiritual path, not completing that. And so this, then often you hear the middle way. And so he came to see that in the middle, between these 2, there's sufficient nourishment, sufficient resources. So you don't have to spend all your lifetime just trying to get sufficient resources to stay alive and support your family, but that there is some time sometimes expressed as leisure, some time for actually focusing on the spiritual path and doing things that are meaningful in your life, that are beneficial for others. So that's what we're, I guess that was, his life is an example of that. Sometimes with extreme wealth, people ignore what maybe they could do on their spiritual path because they just get caught up in all the material wealth of this lifetime and distracted by that. In extreme poverty, there's no time for doing anything excepting find enough food to be able to survive another day. So that's in two little verses explaining this. But Buddha taught for 45 years, so of course there's much more than that in how to achieve that, nirvana or enlightenment. So the 12th deed.
The verses are not typed.
Oh, rightio. So I have got them here. Okay. So Miffy's going to type the verses, those two verses in for you. So the 12th deed was passing from sorrow in the city of Kushingar. So we often see images of the Buddha lying down. So this is an image of the Buddha as he died with one hand under, right hand under, I think, under his cheek, and actually his little finger against his nose here, so he was breathing through the other nostril, and the left hand on his left thigh, and it said the energy in the body at that time, that's a calm, peaceful energy. And so he was 80 years old by this time, and he explained to his chief disciple, Venerable Nanda, that he'd reached the end of his life. And so, oh, there you go, it's all written here, laid down on his right side with his back to the north, gave precepts to his disciples and passed into parinirvana. So then these were the 12 deeds of the Buddha that, and you know, sooner or later we will die, and it's many people get surprised by this. They come to, something happens, they come to near the end of their life, and some people even when they've reached a really, what we'd call an old age, a good age, they're still shocked. My father, I think he thought he was going to live to forever. At 96, when the cardiologist said there was nothing to be done about his heart, he argued and said, couldn't you just try and see if you might, you know, make medical history by me surviving? And he said, no, the anaesthetist will not anaesthetise you. You're not well and the operation won't work. And he said, well, I don't believe that. I'm going to get a second opinion. And his children were a bit appalled. But anyway, the second opinion, unsurprisingly, was exactly the same as the first. So then he had to accept. But yes, I think he thought that he'd live forever. But many, many people have died younger than we are. I'm not sure how old you are, but I do mean younger than you. Sometimes people die as children. Sometimes people die in their teens. So, you know, there's no saying because I'm only this age, then that won't happen to me. But very few of us are prepared. Very few of us have really thought about what are the important things I want to achieve. I work with one of the hospice services, and sometimes people say, oh, we plan to drive around Australia, or we plan to do this or that, go on holidays, things like that. But I'm not sure how many of them, after they've got over the shock of not travelling around Australia, many of them also haven't prepared for passing out from this life into their next life and how that's going to work. And that's why they asked to see me. I only see people who have actually asked to see me or to see a nun. And so then we talk about those sorts of things, not so much the trip around Australia, but we talk about what would be the things that they actually want to do in terms of their spiritual life.
Sonia says the Dharma teachings of impermanence really interest me, particularly at this point in time.
Oh, right. Well, Sonia, the teachings on impermanence are very important, because this is what keeps, if we can keep that in mind, we don't get a shock when our health changes or when different things happen, because they're like this at this moment, but it doesn't mean they'll continue to be like the way they are. And, you know, then, of course, there's the impermanence of this body, the impermanence of our health, the impermanence of, you know, all sorts of things. Gradually, our body changes, doesn't it? We're born in this tiny little child, baby, and then we get bigger, we get stronger, and these sorts of things. But then also, gradually, then past a certain age, we start to, well, we do literally shrink a little bit, but we also lose that strength, and, you know, our digestion isn't as fantastic, and our hearing and our eyesight and all these things gradually deteriorate. But it's taught in Buddhism, you know, that this is going to happen to us all, just as it happened to Buddha, just as it happened to all previous beings, whether they were very rich, very poor, whatever. And so they're not wasting this life. You know, it's one of the, in a shortened version, it's like death is certain, the time of death is uncertain. What helps us at the time of death is the Dharma, the Buddha's teachings, or our spiritual practice, what we've done to make our life meaningful. Some people, they learn the teachings and then it inspires them to go and do things, helping others, that sort of thing. The things that make our life meaningful, raising our family, educating children, whatever it might be that is meaningful for us, that's beneficial for us and beneficial for others. These are the important things in our life. So the Buddha's teachings, the first teaching that he taught to these 5 disciples are called the Four Noble Truths. So someone got the teaching, someone got the handouts, did they?
Yeah, but they're not in the class tonight.
Oh, right, okay.
If you want the handouts, you can get them online or you can email me.
So Buddha taught these 4 Noble Truths, and these are taught across all different traditions in Buddhism. So before we go on to that, are there any questions about Buddha's life and the similarity with our life? And seeing that as an example, I guess, of, you know, using our life in a way that helps us progress on the spiritual path.
Well, I have one, Venerable.
What's your question, Nippy?
That often I think, you know, the Buddha was so amazing, he could do it, but I could never. You know, I just look and I go, that was just a charmed existence.
Well, it was a charmed existence, if you like, but it was charmed because of the karma he'd created in past lives. It wasn't, he said it was 30,000 lifetimes. Now, this is a round number. 30,000 often appears, 30,000 billion galaxies. You know, it's a bit like the 84,000. It's a number that often comes up in the teachings. And so Buddha said that once he achieved Buddhahood, he could look back on the previous lives and see that actions done in one life created the karma for other things to happen in future lifetimes. And so he also said the things that he taught were the things that were useful for him in that progress from when he didn't have any sort of, if you like, understanding of a spiritual path to what were the things that helped him along the way through all those lifetimes. And it can be easy for us to do exactly that, to think, oh, well, that person can do it, but I can't. And by the time you get to my age, there's a number of things that people can do in all sorts of ways that I can't do, and if I try, it will end badly. However, one of the things we can do in particular is rejoice in the things that those who've progressed further on the path do. And so in some of the pujas and prayers that we do, it's, you know, to rejoice in those that we know and those that have been in the past. So in Buddha, in all our precious teachers like the Dalai Lama and Lama Zopa, all those who we see have progressed on in this particular Buddhist path, but also those who are doing virtuous things, maybe inspired by other particular spiritual teachers like Jesus or Moses or one of the saints or the bodhisattvas that are in Buddhism, close to their, you know, having progressed a long way on their spiritual path, and rejoice in the things that they're doing. And in one of the DVDs for Discovering Buddhism, Reba Rinpoche, who's died from a lifetime when he said this, and his rebirth is now in one of the universities in India, he said, this is the easiest way to accumulate merit, rejoicing in all the virtues of all the holy beings, holy objects, all these different virtuous beings, and particularly virtuous places where things have happened, like where the Buddha achieved enlightenment, rejoicing in all of these. And this brings, without actually physically have to do anything, this brings great waves of merit, increases our karma, because we're rejoicing in all these virtuous things that are happening, all the things, all the prayers that the teachers do, all the teachings they give, all these things, we can rejoice in those, all those that have happened today, all those that have happened in the past, all the way back to the Buddha, but also all the virtuous things he did to achieve that, because that's what we need to do similarly. So Reba Rinpoche says this is a way to collect great waves of merit without any great physical. We just have to remember to do it. Because it does look daunting. It definitely looks very daunting. So then these Four Noble Truths, this summarises the answers that Buddha found about why are we here, why do we suffer, where do I come from, how do I get more happiness, what happens when I die, how can I make life meaningful. And so I'll go through the Four Noble Truths briefly, but it's also explained by way of a medical analogy. And so I'll briefly go through that as well. So the Four Noble Truths, this was taught at this time to these 5 disciples. Well, they became his disciples once he'd given this teaching. These are the ones who thought he'd given up on the spiritual path. And so the first noble truth is the noble truth of suffering. It's sometimes called the 4 Arya truths. Arya is the Sanskrit word. And this is the truth, there is suffering. And sometimes people say, you know, Buddhism, it talks about suffering and death, but this is our experience. You know, we have suffering and eventually we'll die. So there are different ways of describing our suffering. One of the most common ways, and one that's easily understood, is these dividing it into 3 sufferings, 3 types of suffering. There's the suffering of pain, or sometimes called the suffering of manifest suffering. So this is when we hit our thumb with a hammer, eat something that gives us indigestion, whatever it might be. The suffering that we all experience, that we all know. We don't get what we want. We buy the chocolate and then find it doesn't taste as good as it looked on the packet, whatever it might be. So the second one is the suffering of change. So this is when something that makes us happy changes. So we're cold, we're suffering with the cold, we go into the sun, and then it's too hot, we're suffering with the heat. So that's a very simple example. A more complicated one you know, the things that we experience that are a deeper suffering are things to be like, we work hard to get a degree at university because we want to work in this profession, and we get a job and it's all wonderful, and then the boss changes or the job changes or we get redundant or whatever it might be. And this is where what used to make us happy now is bringing us suffering. So this is called the suffering of change, where something that made us happy or satisfied, whatever, became something that made us suffer. And then there's what's called the all-pervasive suffering of compounded existence. So this is about living in this life. So the existence that we're in, we have uncontrolled rebirths, uncontrolled deaths, and it's all pervasive. Those of us who here in samsara, it pervades us all, it pervades all our lives. We keep having these rebirths in different places, different realms, but we have to die out of that and into another one. And the second noble truth is the truth of the cause of suffering, sometimes the origin of suffering. So the cause of the suffering are our mental afflictions that drive the actions of our body, speech and mind. So it's said there are 84,000 afflictions. So these are our states of mind where we become unhappy in our mind. In some way it comes about that, then the way we respond to that is with an afflictive, disturbed state of mind where we say and do things that are meant to cause suffering to others, things we either say something to hurt someone or we do something to, whether we steal something or whatever it is, with the aim to hurt, harm, cause suffering to others. And they can be summarised as 6 root afflictions. The first one's ignorance, and it just means not knowing. It's not meant as a derogatory term towards it. We all have this not knowing. If we all knew perfectly like the Buddha, we'd be enlightened. So it's not knowing is something that we all have. And in our ignorance, then we become, the second one's anger, the third one's attachment, there's pride, doubt and wrong view. So doubt is considered like a two-pointed mind where we can't decide what's the right way to do things or the wrong way to do things, or we're not sure and we have a bit of a guess. But doubt can also be a beneficial thing, because if we recognise that we've got doubt, it can propel us towards seeking what is wisdom, what is the right way. It's our wisdom will overcome our ignorance, and sometimes if we recognise we're not really sure that this way we've always responded to this thing, when this person says or does something, we get frustrated or angry or leave or whatever. But if we come to think, well, maybe that's not the most useful thing, maybe there's a better way to deal with that will be more helpful for me and more helpful for that person. So this doubt can sometimes be a useful thing. And then wrong view here at this point means having the wrong view about Buddhism, thinking that maybe karma doesn't exist, maybe there's no past and future life, maybe Buddha never achieved enlightenment, maybe he was always enlightened. So it's about having the wrong view of the Buddhist teachings. And so when we have that wrong view, then we're not going to actually, as a Buddhist, we're not going to be following what the Buddha taught. So that's what we're talking about there. The third noble truth is the truth of the cessation of suffering. So that Buddha taught there's a complete cessation of suffering and all of its causes, which is called nirvana. So by this time, when we achieve nirvana, we've eliminated all the negative karmic seeds, and so we can no longer experience suffering. So the mental afflictions, the disturbed states of mind, whatever it is you might call it, they leave imprints on our mind, karmic seeds, and then if we've got a lot of karmic seeds, like if we're often impatient, then we'll quickly become more impatient again in a similar situation. And even now that they can look at our brains, the pathways for, you know, particular things, they can see where these are stronger, thicker, if you like, if we got frequently in that way. But we can change and we can develop our patience, and we can increase that, and then those changes can actually be seen in the brain, that the most active pathways, they actually grow stronger. So in our pursuit of this true cessation of suffering, we have to develop these antidotes to those afflictive states of mind. It's tricky, but that's what we're aiming to do. So all these negative states, when I say negative and positive, negative are things that, negative states of mind are those that lead us to actions that slow us down or take us backwards on the spiritual path. Positive actions are those that help us progress on our spiritual path. And so it is possible, all of these, it's called adventitious. They come and they go. We're not angry all the time. We're not impatient all the time. We're not kind and loving all the time. And the more we increase things like compassion and patience and loving kindness, the stronger they'll become, and the more they're able to overcome and act as an antidote to the opposite. So the fourth noble truth then is the path to the cessation of suffering. And so this path, this is practicing the path is what leads us to nirvana and enlightenment. And so all of the Buddhist teachings are about how we progress along this path towards that true cessation of suffering. And so they can be described in various ways, the Eightfold Noble Path, the different things, but one of these is the three principal aspects of the path are renunciation, which is giving up our attachment to the things that bring us suffering, following along behind things, repeatedly making the same mistakes, that sort of thing. Bodhicitta is the second one of these three principal aspects, and this is ultimate compassion, if you like. There's one way of describing it. Compassion for all beings, whether you like them or not, for absolutely every being. Mosquitoes, those aggravating things that buzz around your ears, all these things. Still compassion, wishing them to be free of suffering. And then the wisdom of emptiness. So this is realising that all things are empty of inherent existence. They don't exist the way they appear. So are there any questions about that? We will go over these in greater detail in next class. Any questions out
Seems
there?
everyone's fine.
Either that or bamboozled.
Well, no, I think it's really clear.
Thank you, Miffy.
It's great hearing it again. Such a treat. I was sitting here thinking, wow, I get to have personalised Dharma teachings.
One-on-one. So this teaching of the Buddha, this was the first teaching he gave, and the 45 years of teachings all fit somewhere in this path to the true cessation of suffering. And there's this story that one time Buddha was walking through the forest with a group of monks and students, and he picked up a handful of leaves and he said, "Are there more leaves in my hand or more leaves in this entire forest?" And they said, "Well, in the entire forest." And he said, "Yes, and what I teach you is equivalent to the leaves in my hand. There are lots of other things that you might come to know that are true, you know, about all sorts of things. But the things I teach are how you progress on the spiritual path. These are things that helped me, and these are the things that will help you in progressing towards what I've achieved. So there are many other things we have to learn in our life. It's true, we have to learn how to dress ourselves. We have to learn how to earn a living. We have to learn how to pass exams at school, all the different things we need, how to drive a car, all these things we need to learn that help us in this life, but also then we can teach others. If we learn how to dress ourselves properly and there's someone else who hasn't got that figured out, or when we have children of our own, or even nieces and nephews, you can help them. Even simple little things, you can help them because you've learned how. If you never learnt to do them, you wouldn't be able to help others. So these Four Noble Truths, they can be described, explained by way of a medical analogy. So first we imagine, you know, that we're a sick person and we're sitting in front of a doctor. But in Buddhism, the problem is not so much physical as our mind, our mental and emotional sufferings, our attachment, our anger, our confusion, these sorts of things. So unenlightened beings have these sufferings. We're the suffering patients. So we need to understand how and why we experience the suffering, the First Noble Truth. So the first thing we need to know is what are the causes for our sickness. So a skilled doctor can identify what the causes are and prescribe a treatment. Someone without proper training might give us treatment that doesn't help or could even cause more harm. If we just tell our friendly neighbour, they might say, oh, I've got some tablets left from when, you know, a couple of years ago when I had a bit of sounds a bit like that, maybe you could take these. You know, it could be antibiotics out of date, could be anything, could be something we're allergic to. Might cause us more suffering. So we need to check that. What this means is we really need to check our teachers very carefully to ensure that what they teach is going to be helpful for us. So there's many teachings on, you know, how to identify a skilled teacher. Anyone who knows more than us can teach us that thing. You know, have any, you know, all sorts of the things that we learn. But in terms of committing our spiritual, you know, progress to a teacher, we need to be sure that our teachers, like the skillful doctor, who's a teacher who's studied, who knows more than us about the spiritual path, the teachings of Buddha, who can answer our questions, these sorts of things. So teachers like the Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa, our geshes that come, this sort of thing. Our geshes that come when we haven't got the restrictions of our current situation. And someone reminded me that there's this saying that from a teacher long ago, that we need to be very careful about how we choose our teachers, because the teachers that we make commitments to, take refuge with, are ordained by, we make a strong connection with them and we'll meet them again and again, life after life. So we need to be careful because we will become like them. Hopefully we will become like them. So this is what we're looking for, is the doctor who can see what it is that we need. And so in Buddhism, it said for our progress in the spiritual path, we need to understand the causes of our illness. And so this is the second noble truth, the origin of our suffering. And then the doctor explains the treatment or the medicine that you need. So the medicine that brings us back to good health on the spiritual path is the Dharma teachings, the teachings of the Buddha. So this, what we want at the end of that is the third noble truth. That's what we're looking for, the true cessation of sickness or suffering. We want to get over the illness that we've got, that we've gone to the doctor with. And so the medicine, we need to take the medicine. So the fourth point here is that the medicine is the Dharma, the Buddha's teachings. So we have to actually apply it. Just like if the doctor prescribes the perfect medicine, but we don't take it properly, or we don't take it at all, or we only take it once a day instead of 3 times a day, or whatever it might be. If we don't follow the teachings about the medicine isn't going to really work. So we need to put the Dharma into our lives, into our actions of our speech and our mind, as well as into our head. The Buddhist teaching is not meant to be some intellectual bit of knowledge to be able to argue with someone or sound wise. It's something we need to practice and bring onto our spiritual. This is how we travel on the spiritual path. So the Buddha's the doctor who prescribes the medicine, and the medicine's the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha. Dharma literally translates as truth, if you like. So it's the truth that the Buddha taught. And so there's 3 jewels of Buddhism, it's sometimes called, the Buddha, the Dharma, so the Buddha, his teachings, and the Sangha. So this is a spiritual community who help us practice our Dharma, to practice together, and who we can ask for advice. And so that's in the medical analogies, like the nurses, the physios, the chemists, that sort of thing, that help bring it all about for us. And so the Buddha is sometimes called a holy being, but the word that's translated from Tibetan, it really means more like the truthful one. So Buddha said not to accept his teachings just out of respect for him. And the Dalai Lama says this, the great teachers say this, you have to look at the teaching and determine whether this is right for you. It may not be right for you at this time, or at this in this lifetime or something. It may not be something you can practice, but the Buddha said we should check exactly like a goldsmith checks gold before it's bought. So if you think about 2,500 years ago, when the Buddha was teaching, there wasn't gold produced in some factory somewhere that was pure gold and whatever. So they goldsmiths, not just buying a yellow rock. So to check that it was really gold, they'd cut through it to see it was gold all the way through. So we need to cut right through the Buddha's teachings and make sure it's, what we're practicing is really useful, beneficial, truthful. And they would melt the gold, what was being offered to them, because real gold, you can melt it many, many times and it comes back to just like it was before you melted it. Whereas if it's got some impurities in it, if it's been mixed with some other metals, they separate out under heat, so you can see, is it pure gold or not? And then the other thing they used to do with the gold is polish it, and gold develops a really lovely sheen that you can polish, and even though there might be dirt or something on it, you can wash that and polish it. The shine comes through again. So we should check gold, the Buddha's teachings, in this way, and rationally decide and put into practice the things that can help us now. In time, we'll be able to put more into practice. So this is how the medical analogy works, that we, hopefully can put this into practice, put it into our life, the Dharma, and try and apply these things. So,
With the Sangha?
The Sangha, they're like the nurses and the chemists and the physios, all those who help us along the way. So are there any questions? You all good? So we're going to talk now about meditation. So we all know the traditional meditation posture, the sitting cross-legged, and
They're all saying that. All good.
we're all good. Excellent. So we're going to look now at this meditation posture. And so many of us, most of us, at one time in our life could sit cross-legged. You've got to bunch of kids in kindergarten. The teacher says, sit down, we're going to have a story, and they all sit down on the floor and they're all as comfortable as for 20 minutes, whatever. As we get older, and especially once we go to school and, you know, sit at your desk, sit at the dining room table, whatever, we get out of the habit. All of our ligaments, you know, get to sitting in the chair, and that's what we're comfortable with. So if you're comfortable on a cushion, that's great. There's many benefits to that posture, but we can bring all of those into sitting in a chair. And one of the teachers who comes here sometimes, Geshe Zopa, he said, you know, those of us who sit in chairs, we're preparing for when Maitreya Buddha comes, because Maitreya Buddha, the next founder Buddha, is depicted very often sitting as if it's on a chair. And so he says we're just making that connection with the next founder Buddha. So I hope he's right. I think it takes a bit more than just sitting in a chair, but we'll go with that. So when we sit cross-legged in the full lotus posture, it's very comfortable. The body doesn't get tired. The back automatically stays upright, and we don't get so tired. But it's difficult to achieve at times, and for some of us impossible now. So it gives a good support to the body and to the mind to be able to sit for a nice long time. So if we're sitting in a chair, it's said it's good to have the lower part of your back supported and not be leaning back too much like this, because this is liable to, well, that's going to give me a sore neck actually if I do that. But it can also, if we've got a chair that's comfortable, we just finish up going to sleep or leaning over one side or the other. In meditation, we're looking for a calm, alert mind. If you can't get off to sleep and you try a little breathing meditation to calm your mind and go to sleep, and that works, that's excellent. But when we're sitting in meditation, we're not really trying to go to sleep. We're not trying to daydream, all these things. So here, what we're trying for is this calm, alert mind. And so when we're sitting on a chair, if we've got our lower back supported and our feet comfortably on the floor, so you might need to put a cushion under your feet or something, just so it's comfortable. And really the posture is about having our body comfortable so our mind is not distracted by it. Meditation is an activity of the mind, and all the things about your posture is just to get the body comfortable so it cannot distract the mind with an itch here or whatever, because those are just distractions. So our arms, it said good to have our hands loosely in our lap, right hand on top of the other, thumbs lightly touching, and so sort of making a bit of a triangle like this. And for some people this is very comfortable. If it's not comfortable, you might be comfortable with your hands on your lap, turned up, turned down, whatever it is. And sometimes it'll be one way or the other, but whatever's going to be comfortable for you is what's important. Having your back, after being comfortable, the next important thing is to have your back as straight as it can be in a relaxed way, fully upright, as if your vertebrae were like a stack of blocks or coins. And this helps the flow of the energy, and that helps with this clarity and alertness of your mind. So it's not a rigid, tight back, it's the natural curvature, but just not leaning one side or the other. So with your eyes, sometimes it's easier to concentrate with your eyes fully closed, but this can also mean you go fully to sleep. So this is one of the things you can adjust. If you can learn to leave your eyes slightly open, so there's a little bit of light, that can help keep your mind a bit more alert. But if it's just a distraction, then closing them's fine. The difficulty might be if you're a bit tired, then it leads more towards sleepy, daydreaming, whatever. So if you do feel a bit tired, you might like to open your eyes a little bit more. If your mind's really distracted, scattered, you might close them for a while. Your jaw and your mouth should be relaxed. If your teeth are slightly apart, this actually helps relax a lot of the muscles around your jaw. We've all seen people going up the street or whatever and really tight. Their jaw so tight. Your tongue resting up against the back of your upper teeth. And so this is said to reduce the flow of saliva and the need to swallow. For most of us, we aren't at that level of meditation where an involuntary swallowing some saliva is going to distract us, but maybe we'll achieve that really deep level of concentration one day, so it's good to practice that at the beginning. Now your head, you can let that tip forward just a little bit. This helps relax some of the muscles around your neck and your shoulders. If your chin's too high like this, your mind gets too busy, too alert and distracted, and your mind will wander. If you drop your head too far forward, this leads to sleepiness, dullness, whatever. So certainly the angle of your head and how far your eyes are open, these are the things that can really help us if we have that tendency towards either getting too sleepy or getting too much mental wandering. Excitement, they call it. It's not quite what we call excitement, but our mind gets too excited. So we all good? So we're going to do a little meditation now. No, too much of that medical analogy, isn't it? Now, I nearly said medication. I'm not sure how many of you caught that. If you did. So are we all pretty good with the posture? At least comfortable. Some people can meditate lying down. Some people love meditating lying down. That would not work for me. That would just lead to sleeping. But it is quite possible, and certainly if we're unwell and we have to lie down, often that's a pretty distressing thing for us, and so being able to meditate and not think, oh, well, I can't meditate because I can't sit up, that's not going to be helpful. If you're so sick that you have to lie down, being able to meditate will be a very useful thing. So now we're going to do meditation scanning the body. So is everyone okay, Miffy? You writing them a story?
They're all good.
They're all good? Okay. So first of all, in your nice comfortable position, just bring your attention to your breathing. So when we're doing a breath meditation, we're not trying to change anything about our breath. Our breathing will be uneven, sometimes a little breath, sometimes a deeper breath. At this stage, that doesn't matter. Just let your mind settle on your breath, gently coming and going. Focusing on our breath is a great way to develop our concentration. We're practicing, have our mind just focus on this one thing. Our breath coming and going, whether you focus on the rising and falling of your shoulders and your chest, or just the breath coming in your nostrils, whichever way, just let your mind settle, become calm. To be fully focused on your breath, you let go of any other thing that comes into your mind, whatever that might be. It's a distraction from just focusing on the breath. This is just to prepare our mind to be ready to engage in meditation. And now we have a motivation for the meditation. So whatever we might be going to do, having a motivation means that we have a goal and we can see whether or not we're working towards achieving that goal. So if we have an altruistic motivation, then we think that we're meditating not just for our own benefit, but we're taking this time now to meditate, develop our mind, become wiser and kinder, and able to benefit all beings. Now bring your attention to the lowermost parts of your body, where your body's in contact with the cushion or the chair, the floor. These are the things that are the earth element. This is what's supporting your body. And the earth element is that supportive element that holds us up. And while you focus there on these lowermost parts, feel that the substance and the earthy character of your body, that there are parts of your body supporting the other parts. So while you're concentrating on this contact, on this weight and the substance of your physical form, make a note of the character or the nature or the tone of your mind while you're focused on these lowermost parts. Your mind, your consciousness, it's the same thing. Now slowly and mindfully, we're going to gently move our attention upward through the body. So as we go, just paying close attention to every aspect of the body, to all the physical sensations, being aware of any tension, and where there's tension, just letting that relax. So gently up through your legs, being aware that some parts of your body are cooler than others, some parts of your body coming in contact with other parts of your body, up to your hips, your hands in your lap, the curves of your body's silhouette, gently upward through your belly, your waist, the curves of your arms, the rising and falling of your chest as you breathe, the curves of your shoulders, slowly, mindfully, pay special attention to your shoulders, your neck and your jaw. Check for any tension. It often builds up in these areas. Just let them relax. Moving upward, being aware of the tilt of your head until you reach the very crown of your head, the topmost part. So allow your mind, your consciousness to rest at this very topmost part of your head. And again, pay attention to that tone or character of your mind focused here. Is there any difference compared with when you're concentrating at those lowermost parts in your body? Now slowly, gently, moving your attention back downward through your body in the same way, mindfully noting everything about your body as you're moving your attention downward through your head, your neck, your chest, your hips all the way down to the chair or the cushion, parts of you touching the floor, the parts of you in contact with the earth elements. And again, focusing your concentration there, make a note of your mind when you're focused. When you're focused on these supporting parts, is there a difference from when your mind was concentrated at the crown? And we'll dedicate all your positive energy and insights from the meditation and the class to the well-being and happiness of all living beings. And when you're ready, you can just slowly open your eyes. So are there questions, or are you playing solitaire?
I'll ask if there's any questions.
So sometimes people can notice a difference. I don't want to say what they might notice from the top of their head to the, when they're focusing on those lowermost parts. Did people notice the difference?
No questions.
No questions?
Thank you, no questions.
Okay, so I don't know if that means you noticed a difference. Sometimes people notice their mind feels lighter or airier or something at the top when they're focused at the top, and they feel more grounded and stable when they're focused on those lowermost parts of the body. And if that's the case, you can use that yourself if you feel your thoughts are a bit scattered and wild. You can bring your attention to the lowermost supporting parts of your body. And if you feel that your mind's a bit slow moving, that it's, a bit dull, if you raise your awareness up to higher up to the, to the top of your head, then sometimes that can awaken your mind a little bit and help you become more alert.
Yeah, so Sonia says, I felt much more grounded and less anxious when I focused on my lower body, and I'll concur too. I felt a whole lot less panicky doing that.
And so it said these insights, what it says here, can be useful in managing our own mind. And this is the thing, sometimes we learn something like that in meditation, we experience it, and then it's something, if we can remember it and we find our mind's a bit scattered, just bringing our attention down and taking a couple of breaths while we're aware of that support. There is that support there. Our body is this solid thing. We're not just this scattered energy. It can be helpful for us. it's said in the teachings that all the things we learn in meditation, and if what we learn is that this or that meditation of all the many, many meditations there are, is the one that's useful for us if we're feeling something anxious or tired or depressed or whatever it might be. There might be different meditations we find useful for different times in our lives. It's good to put these into our life. It said that all the things that we find in meditation, the things that are useful for us, they should be able to be things that we can then apply in our life, not just meditation, using meditation as a way to relax, but using it as something, I mean, relaxing is useful, but something that we can easily bring to mind in a situation when we're feeling anxious or whatever it might be, feeling depressed and really dark and, you know, really down. And then if we can, and it can be difficult if you're feeling like that, it can be difficult to bring your mental energy up to the high, you know, up to the top of your head or even a bit above it, to try and bring some more lightness and light into your mind.
So then next week, Venerable?
So next week we're going to look at, there'll be question and answers if you've got any questions that come up, and then we're going to look in a bit more detail at the Four Noble Truths and what that, you know, what the ways that we can look at those and recognise them and put them into the benefits of keeping them in mind in our life, and recognising the things we do don't just have an impact in this moment, but they do in, you know, we know if we get angry and yell at our friend, that's not the end of it, is it? We feel uncomfortable then, but then later on we've got to apologise or we've got regrets or our friend doesn't even want to know. And, you know, having said something, you can't unsay it. Everybody doesn't develop amnesia. So if you can, you know, refrain from actually saying it, you might still have it in your mind, but if you don't upset others, that's a bit, you know, a step along the way. And, you know, we're creating karmic seeds all the time when we're aware of this. Hopefully we become, you know, if we make mistakes, we do what we can to overcome those, so they're not too much of our mistakes, not too many of our negative karmic seeds from this life are going into our future lives. Okay, if there's no more questions, I hope you found it useful, and we'll meet again next week.